Welcome to the Seahawks Forever podcast. In-depth analysis on everything Seahawks. And now, here's your host, Dan Viens.
This episode, again, brought to you by the folks at Doer, built for doing, flagship stores in Denver and Los Angeles, but you can get everything you need right here at shopdoer.com at your fingertips. Lifestyle apparel for every occasion, and these are my go-to right here. I wear these things on almost a daily basis. Doesn't matter what the weather is, what the climate is. They're breathable and light enough to wear here in the desert when it's 99 degrees like it was today. But also in the Pacific Northwest, when it's 40 degrees and raining, they're 20% stretch. They're made just very, very high quality apparel, and they've got an entire line, just about everything you could ever want. You can find it at shopdoer.com. And right now, you can get 20% off your first order if you go to shopdoer.com/forever. Go to that unique URL just for viewers of this program. Shopdoer, it's DUER.com/forever for 20% off your first order. Thanks, guys. Sorry for the delay. It wasn't that I was late. It was that I posted the wrong time. For those of you who've been joining me live for the last couple of months, I usually go at 7:30. Not quite sure why I failed tonight, but was taking my time getting ready and then realized that the countdown had already passed 0. Here's what we're going to do tonight. We're going to talk about 30 visits, right? Not top 30 visits. I finally gotten that out of my vocabulary because I always thought that was misleading. And there are some teams and analysts that still use the term top 30, although most have made the adjustment. It's not your top 30 players. We'll get to that in a minute, but I want to give you some programming updates and things to expect. I spent a good part of today basically mapping out the next 2 weeks, because 2 weeks from tonight, guys, we're going to be, 7:30. Like, this might be about when the Seahawks are on the clock 2 weeks from tonight. So here's what's going to happen. First of all, during the draft on first and second day, because the Seahawks have so many picks on day 2 as well, I'll do a live watch party throughout the entirety of both days. Day 1, Bryce Coots, friend of the show, good friend of mine, is going to be joining me on the Hawks from the Hawks Zone Rundown. Might have some other special guests pop in as well. And we'll just be following along the entirety of the first round and kind of what happens throughout the league. I anticipate this is going to be one of the more intriguing first rounds because none of us have any idea what's going to happen. You know, it's you hear the term chalk, and sometimes that applies to the top 10, 15, 20 picks where everyone kind of has a pretty good idea how it's going to go. This year, once you get past the first 5 or 6, man, it's a crapshoot. So we'll be following along with that. And then on day 2, same thing, live watch party throughout the whole thing. I'll have some special guests pop in as well. Since the Seahawks are one of only 3 teams with 4 picks on day 2, there will be a lot to talk about. Not like other years, right? Last year, 1 pick on day 2, that was kind of boring. Certainly wasn't worth doing a live watch party for. And then kind of doing a Quentin Tarantino thing here and working backwards on draft day eve. So Wednesday, the 23rd, 13 days from tonight. It's an annual tradition for me personally to watch the movie Draft Day sometime right before the draft. It's so cheeseball, I know, but I think there's 2 reasons I fell in love with that movie, and it's an awful guilty pleasure of mine. One is just the fact that Hollywood decided that the NFL draft was worth making a major movie about with some big time stars. Was pretty cool. You know, I think it's a real indication of like how big this thing's gotten. It's not just for us nerds anymore. It's a lot more mainstream. But the other thing is Kevin Costner's in it. And I will watch any sports movie that has Kevin Costner in it in any way, shape, or form. And that is certainly his wheelhouse. So we'll do that, and we'll do a watch party together. And the way that'll work is at the beginning, we'll all sync it up on whichever streaming service. And just to let you know ahead of time, I think last year it wasn't anywhere free. I had to pay like $2.99 to rent it or whatever. So, I'll give you plenty of advance notice there, and I'll do the research, find the different ways that we can watch it, and we'll sync it up. So we'll start at like a certain specific point of the opening credits. I'll pause it and let everybody know where we're at, and then we'll all kind of hit play at the same time. And then about halfway through the movie, maybe twice during the movie, we'll take a couple other spots and sort of pause it again for people that join late, and try to sync it up again. And then we can just react to it in the chat and talk about it and have fun with it. That'll be kind of a fun way to get into the draft after all of this analysis that we've been doing for the last couple of months. And then basically, as I said, spent a good amount of today, reaching out to people and locking in some guests. So a lot of really cool conversations coming up over the next 2 weeks as we get ready for the draft. Of a more immediate nature, as soon as we're done tonight, and I'll try to keep this one tonight to about an hour. And then I want to react to the John Schneider radio show today. I'll do one of those. I like to blind react to that. So I haven't watched anything that's happened with that today. That'll post first thing in the morning, although it will be available immediately to members. Anytime there is an episode, especially this time of year, that's not time sensitive, especially when I release it kind of late at night, I'll make it available to members only first, and then set it for probably hit about 9 a.m. tomorrow morning. So it'll be available to everyone in the morning. But if you're a member, that's one of the perks, and you get early access to some videos, and that'll be one of those. And then tomorrow morning, I'm interviewing Justin Milo, lead writer for the Draft Network. We've been talking for quite some time, trying to find a time to do this. So I'm going to get up early. That's my commitment, and have a conversation with him. That show won't likely post until Saturday morning for everybody, but again, I'll make it available tomorrow night for members. So that's the immediate concern, and then moving forward, we'll keep up with that. And the best way to keep up with all that is be a subscriber to the channel. And that way, anytime you go to your YouTube page, when I upload new content, it'll show up in your search and your suggestions. But if you really want to know, as soon as new content is posted, hit that bell down under the screen there for notification of all content. And if you want to support the show in any other way, you can do that by checking the description of the show down below. All the links are there. All right, you guys, let's talk about this, the 30 visits. And the reason I want to do that today is because in the last, 2 or 3 days, we've gotten a lot of reports of visits of prospects coming to Seattle. And it had been pretty quiet on that front up until this week, basically. And even then, I think we have 13 names that are confirmed, unless anything has come up in the last couple of hours. I haven't checked. And, we may not get all 30 names reported. The Seahawks like to keep things close to the vest. Usually those 30 visits are leaked by the agents, right? If not the players themselves, because, sometimes they'll post Instagram pictures of the stadium and the big video board at the stadium. A lot of teams will do that, like welcome Joe Schmaghetti, and they'll put it up on Lumen Field and get them thinking about what that would feel like, and have them to start to visualize being a Seahawk, right? And so the list this year is worth talking about, and it isn't always. In many past years, the Seahawks have used a good portion of their 30 visits for players that they're not as familiar with. Day 3 guys, and in a lot of cases, undrafted free agency. With the top prospects, they have chances to meet them at the Senior Bowl. There are 2 different types of interviews at the Senior Bowl. One is it's basically speed dating, where every single team gets a few minutes with every single prospect. And they basically just they have a certain amount of time, and then they rotate around, just like speed dating. But then you can also request to see prospects for a second time while you're in Mobile. And for instance, we know that they met twice with Jackson Slater in Mobile. And when Jackson was on the show, the center guard from Sacramento State, Bellevue kid, Newport High School, he told us that that was the only team that asked for a second visit with him at at the Senior Bowl. And then at the Combine, they get, it's changed every year. I can't remember how many it was this year. I think it's 45 visits where you get 18 minutes apiece with that many players. So you have to be pretty selective. There's over 300 players, I think, that go to the Combine. And so we know of reports of players that the teams met with there. And that's usually top prospects. And so the 30 visits is, some of it is with the top prospects. That's kind of what we're going to talk about tonight. Getting to know them even more before you invest high picks and money in them, making sure. But also it gives you a chance to get them in your building. And there's a couple of advantages to that. One is, we hear John Schneider talk about it all the time. See how they interact with the staff, and not just coaching staff, not just their position coaches, not just Mike McDonald, John Schneider, but also like the receptionist, the support staff at VMAC. That's such a tight knit group. And there's a reason that Schneider is always, always, always going out of his way to talk about those people and the job they do. And many people that work in the VMAC have been there for a very long time, predating John Schneider and Pete Carroll. You'll hear him talk about Mo Kelly, Maurice Kelly. You'll hear him talk about Connie, who handles players' families and spouses and things like that, arranges things for them. I've worked with her many times in the past. They did a lot of events at the restaurant that I used to work for, and we had a great relationship with them. And they would have they would bring all the draft picks in and have parents of the draft picks, and Connie would arrange all that. She's been there since before Mike Holmgren. And so they look to see how they interact with even those people. If you're polite and attentive with Mike McDonald, but you turn around and handle, someone on the Seahawks support staff kind of crappy, right? They'll make a note of that. They notice that stuff. Just like when they go to those players' campuses and talk to their coaches and things like that, you'll hear, and it's not just the Seahawks that do this, you'll hear other organizations talk about it too. Like they'll talk to equipment managers, for instance, and trainers. Like how do they interact with you? How do they treat you? So it gives you a chance to see them on the ground floor in that environment, right? Away from their comfort zone, and see how they handle that. That tells them a lot. Are they a Seahawk or not? Is this the kind of person that we want to employ, in addition to just what they can give us on the football field? But then it also gives them a chance to get their team doctors' hands on them and do a physical and look for specific things in their house. So in the past, as I said, a lot of those visits have been to get to know prospects that slip through the cracks, or you just haven't had a chance to talk to, or didn't go to the Senior Bowl. Some of them don't go to the Combine. Or players that you're just not sure about, or maybe something new has cropped up, a little medical issue that wasn't there earlier in the evaluation period, so you need to take a look at it. Character issues. Here's a great example. Isaiah Bond from Texas today turned himself into police because he has been accused of sexual assault. So I'm not saying specifically that's, I'm just using that as an example, something that comes up this late in the process. If that's a player that you previously had a high grade on and you were giving strong consideration to spending a high draft pick on, well, maybe we should get him in the building and find out what the heck's going on and find out for ourselves, right? So there's that. And then when it comes to undrafted free agency, it's a recruiting process. There's only so much teams can do to try to woo you financially. Although the Seahawks have gotten a lot more aggressive in the last couple of years, or especially last year with Joey Lane being the new cap guy, of guaranteeing bigger bonuses for the undrafted free agents they really like. Because once you get to about the 6th round, players that they anticipate falling out of the draft, there's a certain segment of John Schneider's staff that starts working the phones at that point. Like, hey, we'll take care of the rest of the draft. You guys start calling these guys. It's a recruiting process. Like these players and frankly, some of them, once you get to the 7th round, if you haven't been drafted, and I can totally see this, I would prefer to not be drafted, because then you get to choose where you go. If you're a running back, for instance, are you going to want to choose to go to Seattle, where there's 4 really good young running backs still on their rookie contracts in the room already, versus if the Raiders want to sign you, knowing how important running the football is to Pete Carroll and Chip Kelly, and they really don't have anything there. I'm going to go to the Raiders because I'm going to have a better chance not only to make the roster, but maybe to carve out a role and play. And so it's fact finding, getting to know guys that maybe you didn't get a chance to meet with previously, but also trying to plant the seed and getting them excited, like getting them in the building. VMAC's a big selling point on it, especially on a really nice day. You can really wow them. This is what a major league, big time NFL facility looks like, and get that so that's fresh in their minds when that phone call comes in the 6th or 7th round and they're trying to get you to commit. So that's what previously, there have been many years where the Seahawks didn't have a lot of high picks. And so they would focus a good portion of those 30 visits on later prospects. Well, this year's different. This year's way different, right? 5 picks in the top 92. You're doing some heavy lifting with prospects. Here are the 13 names that have been confirmed and reported so far. And some of these it's pretty obvious kind of where they fit in, right? And I kind of grouped it by position groups. So, just starting left to right, top to bottom, Issa Pole, big offensive tackle out of Washington State. He started there for a couple of years. Real physical, moves well for his size, but a guy that, based on every big board and rankings that I've seen, might very well be an undrafted free agent. So that's a good example of getting a guy in and trying to get to know him better, because it might come to that if we get later in the draft. Chase Lunt, likewise, or conversely, I guess, is a little bit of a different example. He's projected to be a 3rd or 4th round pick in most of the big boards and mock drafts that I see. And he's a guy that's come onto my view only in the last couple of weeks. Tip of the cap to Rob Staten for being the first one to bring my attention to him. But now he's kind of become a draft crush of a lot of Seahawk fans and draft nerds, I know, for his physical play style at right tackle, his experience there in the wide zone offense, and also his athleticism, ability to get to the second level. Very similar to Bryce Cabaldo, who was a guy that I had not even heard of until, first of all, I saw the relative athletic score folks post his score. Very, very athletic. Actually started at right tackle for Kansas with Logan Brown on the left side. And a guy that's projected to go kind of anywhere from the 4th to the 7th round. Like, who knows where that guy's going to go, but a very, very athletic tackle that's so athletic, and he's under 310 pounds that a lot of people just naturally now are speculating that maybe he would be more of a fit at guard. Jackson Slater, I put on this list, even though he might not technically count as a 30 visit because he lives in the area. If you play football in the market that the NFL team is in, or if you live there or from there, played college football there, you can count as a local visit. And they get a chance to interview. Though that's unlimited. You can have unlimited virtual meetings and unlimited local visits. And so he probably counted as that. He probably doesn't count against their 30, but I put him on here because I think it's notable that they've met with him in person now for a 4th time. And then actually, on that note, the Seahawks today had their local pro day where they hosted 50 prospects locally. Those don't count as their visits either. And so sometimes you get some under the radar guys, Huskies, Cougs, Oregon State. I think that it's a pretty wide range depending on how many other NFL teams are in your market. But, Seahawks being up here in South Alaska, we, get a little bit of a bigger region. Dylan Fairchild I don't think he's met with the Seahawks yet. I think he's set to meet with them next week. As well as his teammate, Jared Wilson. What's interesting there is so much of the focus has been on Tate Ratledge, and the Seahawks have met with him several times. He's become a Seahawk fan favorite, but Fairchild might not be far behind him. He's projected to go later than Ratledge. I think Ratledge is pretty locked into the 2nd round. Fairchild, you'll see anywhere from the 3rd, 4th area. But a very athletic guy with a wrestling background. You see it in his style of play, really good zone fit. And then Jared Wilson, probably the best pure center in this draft. And I think it's interesting. This one just came up yesterday, I think. And he's interesting because a couple of reasons. We've heard Schneider say they really don't like the center class this year. And then Corbin Smith actually messaged me directly today and said, "Man, I hate this center class." And I think he did a write-up today on the Emerald City Spectrum where he rated center prospects. And he said, it's a bad center class when most of the top centers are guys that play other positions and are projected to maybe be centers, which can be a slippery slope. I mean, it's not that easy to learn that position. Some guys can make the switch and some can't. So I do think the fact that they brought him in, even though you've heard me talk for months about how I'm really high on Olu Oluwatimi and Jared Sundell, and so I'd rather see them not draft a pure center. He is the best of the class. However, there are two things that give me pause about Wilson. One is he only has 1 year as a full-time starter. And also, I don't know that he has a lot of guard experience in his background. Some guys can flex out and some can't. Maybe they see him as a guard. I'm not sure. But interesting, they have now met with all three of the Georgia interior linemen, Fairchild, Wilson, and Ratledge. Ty Robinson, this came out in the last 24 hours, and this excited me greatly, and you know why. You've seen me do him in mock drafts. You've seen me talk about him. I think he's an absolute perfect fit for Mike McDonald as a guy that can play everything from nose tackle to five technique. He can move all the way up and down the line, 4-point stance, stand up, really high motor, blue collar lunch pail guy, like loves football, and you can see it in the effort. I just think he would be an absolutely ideal addition to that defensive line rotation, and probably a guy that right now looks to be going in about the third round. Then we move away from the trenches. Nick Emenwari, I think, was one of the very first 30 visits reported. We all know about him. Great athletic specimen, although I have some questions about his game. Siobhan Ravel, I think I forgot the H there. It's Siobhan Ravel Jr., who was being projected as a top 10, 15 pick, and then he tore his ACL in week 4 last year for East Carolina. If he looks to be completely healthy, he could be a steal. Right now, projected to go in the second round. I find that hard to believe. I think someone's going to take a chance on him earlier because his corner class isn't that good, and his ceiling's really high. And then only one tight end reported so far on a 30 visit, but it's a good one. Mason Taylor from LSU, the all-time record holder in just about every category for tight ends down there. Talked about him recently. Very, very athletic, really smooth pass catcher, but also so good as a blocker, more so in pass protection that LSU would actually keep him in line sometimes against some of the better pass rushers in the SEC to help out there. This one's new this week as well. Mikael Williams, big athletic edge out of Georgia. Some people might question the production there. The pressure rate's only about 11, 12%. Averages about 6 sacks a year for Georgia over the last couple of years, last 3 years. But he's played a lot of football, even though he's still really young. He looks like he was built in a lab to play edge in the NFL, but he can also play inside. He's one of those guys. I've heard some Michael Bennett-ish type comps with him. And also he's a guy that exhibits a lot of other Seahawk qualities. Like I've heard him multiple times from several draft analysts just referred to as a man and a dude and a guy that you absolutely just want in your locker room. And also someone who hasn't played his best football yet. And if you're concerned about the production, I was having a conversation with somebody yesterday who was letting me know that, his role at Georgia is he was often asked to just read and react and not really go after the quarterback. And then speaking of quarterbacks, finishing up there with two guys at opposite ends of the spectrum. Tyler Shuck, going to be 26 years old during the season, a more experienced quarterback, much bigger and taller. And then you have Jalen Milroe, who's all about projection and a guy that you're taking a little bit of a lottery ticket shot on, knowing that he could bust and never become a guy worthy of being an NFL starter, but also someone that if he can fix some of his shortcomings in the intermediate passing game could be like a sky's the limit type player. That's the list so far. As I said, that's not even 15, so we're not even halfway there, but we might not know ever about some of those other picks. And I'll update those, as we go along and give my thoughts on them either here on the show or on Twitter at Seahawks Forever. Can always follow me there, right? Let's go to the questions and comments, see what you guys think so far, or if there's anyone that you've seen reported that I missed, let me know and I'll throw that in here as well. Dogzilla, first one in. Sorry I was late, man. Sorry. This is an interesting name that I'm not sure of. Asked John Schneider today about nose tackle Desmond Mason. He said there's some weight and inertia behind that possible pick. Where's he from? I'll check him out. Yeah, Sean calling me out, running a little late. Motive says, searching for a new opening music track. That is so funny because as of about 6:50 tonight, I was looking for new music, and then I had to get in the shower and get ready, thinking that I was going to go at 7:30. I was wrong. Sorry. Dan's on his way back from the liquor store. Nope, just taking it easy. Got some, this is Four Peaks Brewing, which is a big deal. Oh, look at that with the green screen. That's kind of cool. Probably the biggest brewery down here in the Phoenix area, although as many local breweries have, I believe they're now owned by Anheuser-Busch. It's a pretty light wheat ale. It's only 5%, with some orange in it. It's very, very good. I like it. My palate has changed with beer, you guys. I really can almost not at all drink IPAs anymore. Just my palate's changed, just too strong, too hoppy, and too acidic. Like I'll just give you a heads up. Spoiler alert for those of you who aren't near my age yet. Get ready, because when you get here, heartburn's going to be part of your daily life, and you have to start making some choices based on that. And IPAs don't really help in that area. Let's see. Dogzilla asks, how many do we know of? I've got 13 here on the list, but again, if any of you know any names or notice any names that I missed, let me know. Looks like we had a little chant going. Let's see. What do we got? Oh, see, I like this. Dan the Doer. I should suggest that to him. I am working with my rep with them to see if I can get something free from them to potentially give away to one of you. At least a credit or something where you can get something free off the website for you. Look for that during the draft coverage. We'll do some of that. Sean says, yeah, day 2 should be pretty good if we keep the picks. Let's talk about that. The closer we get to the draft, the more I am convinced that what we end up picking is barely going to resemble what we have on the board right now, which right now we're at 18. Correct me if I'm wrong on this. 18, 50, 52, 82, and 92. Did I nail that off the top of my head? Well, I guess not off the top of my head if I've previously memorized it, right? I don't think it's going to look anything like that. I think the chances of them making their first 5 picks exactly where they sit today is 0. I do. And I think there's a good possibility that it's some combination of trading down from 18 if the opportunity presents itself, because as we've said many times of this draft, this class, there's a good chance that by the time you get to that range, 18, you're not going to have any of your first round grades left on your board, but the depth coming up and the talent level coming up over the next 50 picks or so is going to be so even that if somebody wants to come up just because there's a player they have graded higher or a specific need that they need, that it would make sense to move down, knowing you're not really going to miss out on upside or ceiling. I think it's going to be some combination of moving down from 18 and then moving up, because the one thing I'm more and more convinced of as I look at this draft and as we get closer to it is I don't think there's any way. Let's say for a moment we do stay at 18. There's no way that John Schneider is going to be comfortable going from 18 to 50 without taking a player. That in this draft, there's so many players that they must love and have and graded very highly between 18 and 50. And he's not just going to sit there and watch the parade go by. He's going to use some of those extra picks. And, the roster is so young. Is there an opportunity for 10 new rookies to make an impact? Likely not. And granted, you don't go into every draft thinking every pick has to start or it's a failed draft. Some you're drafting for upside and you're taking a shot on them, and some you're drafting for the future because they need development. but it's I think it's going to be some combination of like, in fact, now that I think about it, I'll upload this to my computer and I'll share it with you. I was playing around today with the simulator from ESPN, the new ESPN Analytics one, and wasn't a big fan of it at first necessarily, only because it's kind of bare bones. But went back to it today, and the first draft I did on it, I liked so much because I do think that their board tends to be more realistic, and they call it a predictive board, and so they build it using a lot of the input from their draft analysts, right? Mel Kiper and Matt Miller and Field Yates and oh shoot, now I'm forgetting his first name, but Reed. They have a lot of really good analysts, and they input all of that as well as their analytics team and some of their next gen stats. And I think it's more realistic. You know, the PFF app, I think their rankings are really off. They're really low, really high on some players. Same with PFN, like criminally low or high on players. So I'll share that with you when we get closer to the end. But yeah, I think it's gonna be some combination of moving around a lot, where you move down, you pick up extra picks, you use some of those to move back up. Maybe you get into the 40 range if there's a guy that you love that you don't think is going to make it to 50, which is only going to make it more fun and only is another reason to tune into the live watch parties, because we're going to have a lot of fun doing that. My goodness, this is not a very good. I'm trying to show. Well, I'll just have to verbal it. I'll do it later. The graphic that they provide when you save it is about this big on my computer screen. Okay, so just another thing that ESPN needs to work on. Yeah, Sean says in that movie Draft Day they make the Seahawks look kind of bad. You think so? When the fans are out picketing and calling for the GM, and all, don't get me started on that movie. Well, I'll save my thoughts for it. It's a love-hate movie because there's some things they just get so wrong. One of the things I want to do during the watch party is at a certain point when they're making all those trades is we'll all pause and then we'll pull out the Jimmy Johnson or the Rich Hill trade chart and we'll see how ridiculous it is or would be in real life. That'll be a lot of fun. I wish we could watch it together like on the screen, but yeah, I would for sure get a copyright strike and not be able to broadcast during the draft. Not going to make that mistake. Schmagetti, he's for sure going to get drafted this year, right? Chris Page says 3:30 a.m. here in Nottingham. Thanks for is it a late night for you, Chris, or an early morning for you? I know that can go either way. I was talking to the guys over at the 12 Talk podcast in London today about getting them on for a little pre-draft thing, and it's an 8-hour time difference, so that's always kind of the challenge. Is like it's either got to be really late at night for me or really early in the morning for me in order for it to work for those guys. We're gonna get into this. Okay, maybe we'll get into some of this during the draft because I think we are gonna. I'll tell you why in a minute. Tasha answers something Dogzilla must have said earlier. Says anyone who orders pineapple on their pizza is instantly out of consideration. For what? Let's see. What are we considering? Yeah, guys, I just don't ever judge what someone wants on a pizza. You know the beauty of pizza? You can put whatever the F you want on it. Anything. And it's okay. Don't judge. Life's too short, man. Charlie says some great names on that list. Let's get to some starred. Ryan Eddy, new member, so you'll be able to get early access to my John Schneider radio show reaction show, which I'll post later tonight for you, and then tomorrow morning for everybody else, things of that nature. And then one night before the draft, we'll have a members only. We're over 100 members now. Thanks so much, you guys. We'll do a members only chat, a live stream just like this. Shortly before the draft, just with members. And then Ryan uses his new membership and gives us super thanks. Thank you. And he says, just because of who you are, go Hawks. Really appreciate that. Thanks, buddy. Let's see. Okay. Tosh is talking about the offensive line, of course. I'm released. Do you mean relieved that John Schneider must choose specific O linemen by now? He understands how dire the situation is and what will happen if he doesn't fix it, so I'm going to believe the problem will be fixed. I think there's two aspects to that I'll respond to. One is, I don't think it's dire. I don't. I really like Olu Oluwatimi. I really like Jalen Sundell, so I think they're good at center. And Christian Haynes is going to fit better in an outside zone scheme than he did last year as a rookie. I spent some time going back and watching some of his college tape a couple of days ago, and it made me even more comfortable that, like, we're good at right guard. Or he can play left guard. I mean, there's some versatility there. We saw him in the preseason last year. He's good, you guys. There's a reason he was drafted at 81 last year, and it was ranked by many, many, many draft analysts as the best pure guard in the draft. Some of the other guards that were drafted higher are guys that were tackles, moved inside. He's good. And just because he didn't hit the ground running and look like an all-pro as a rookie, like, that rarely happens with rookie offensive linemen. It's rare. So, in my opinion, assuming that Abe Lucas is as healthy as he says he is and looks like he is in his off-season workout videos and everything else, that they need a left guard. Or, you can play Haynes on the left side. Not every player is comfortable switching sides. Maybe Tate Ratledge is one of those guys. For example, you take him at 50. Maybe he just doesn't feel comfortable on the left side, but Christian Haynes does. So they flip-flop him. You need one guard that you are sure is a starter as a rookie. I think that's really, really important, and they'll go after that. And then I'm wanting to add at least one more player in the draft that I believe could be the starting right tackle should they choose to move on from Lucas in 2026. And then if you can add a third guy on the interior that can play center and guard, and there's a bunch of those, I'd feel really good with those three. So it's not dire. They tried to address it in free agency. They took their shot on the one guy they thought was worth investing in. He chose to go to a different team, despite a historically good offer from the Seahawks. And then rather than spend their money just to spend it on guys that aren't very good or aren't better than what they have on hand, they are going to address it in the draft. And you are going to see it addressed in those first 5 picks. They will take a guard in those first 5 picks. I am convinced of it, that they feel like can be a starter. And I think that very well might be the move that I was talking about earlier, moving up from 50, where at 18, assuming they stay there, looking at this particular draft class and then how some of the position groups fall off pretty distinctly on day 2, whereas the interior offensive line does not. It might make more sense to go with another position at 18, either defensive line, edge, wide receiver, maybe even tight end if one of those elite guys fall, knowing that you can come back around on day 2 and get your starting guard. But if they, for example, let's say they fall in love with, let's say Gray Zabel falls to day 2, or Dylan or Tate Ratledge is a guy that they love, or Jonah Savanaya, for example, or Wyatt Millam. I think those guys are all going to be pretty high on their board, and they're not confident they're going to get past 40. Boom, they have the ammo to move up from 50 to 40 to get that guy. And when you look at John Schneider's history, trading down hasn't always worked. Getting those extra picks hasn't very often resulted in blue chip players. The goal of this draft, I'm going to do an episode next week focusing specifically on this concept. They have to get, I posited on Twitter the other day that I think they need to come out of this draft with 3 blue chip players. And by blue chip, we mean every team would like to have them. Teams have to game plan for them. Pro bowlers that could be all pros. As much as we like a lot of the talent spread out throughout this roster, the young talent, it's hard to find blue chippers. There's guys that could become that, but they're not right now. I think you need to come out of this draft where we look back on it in a year or two, and instead of going, yeah, there's some nice players there, there's 7 or 8 guys that are contributing, we need some stars out of this draft. And so I think that's why they're going to be aggressive moving up, because in Schneider's history, to finish my thought, is when he has moved up in drafts, he's done very well. Just a couple examples: DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett. Those are guys that he moved up to get. And so I think that's that zone. That's that dead zone between 18 and 50 where he's just not going to be comfortable letting that come to him and being conservative. He's going to try to move up into that spot. I think offensive line might be the goal there. But also just to look back at this list, like there's an emphasis on trenches and on offensive line. And if you look at this and you go, well, it's only 6 of the 13. If you go back and look at the combine meeting list, like a significant majority of the meetings they took at the combine were offensive linemen. And just another reminder, I'll tell you, I saw it with my own eyes in Mobile the first day of practice on Tuesday when John Schneider was there on the sidelines watching practice the entire day, both practices, American and National, on the first day of the Senior Bowl. He exclusively had eyes on the offensive linemen. Wherever they went, even if they're doing individual drills, pad drills, that's where his attention was. So, yeah, he's going to address it. Absolutely. And not just because his job might be at jeopardy, but because he wants to deliver a roster that his head coach wants, that will help create the identity that his head coach wants and play the style of football his head coach wants. Mike McDonald is very involved in this draft process. We've heard that on a number of occasions, and he's going to make it known what he wants, and that is he wants to be physical on offense and defense up front. He wants to be able to stop the run and get after the quarterback on defense. On offense, he wants to be able to run the football when the other team knows you're going to run the football, right? In red zone, 3rd and short, 5-minute drill late in the game, protecting a lead. The other team knows they're stacking up against the run. You can still move people and operate your scheme effectively enough to get yards when the other team knows that that's what you're trying to do. Interesting. Andy Anderson, I'm so mystified that y'all are sleeping like Rip Van Winkle on Cam Smith and Brady Cook. They're Star Trek level above Shuck and Milrow. Cam Smith is South Dakota State, right? Is that the guy you're talking about? Very, very athletic, dual threat quarterback. And Brady Cook, if you didn't watch the episode yesterday, thank you for bringing this up, Andy. Every once in a while, like I love the guests that I've been able to have on the show for the last couple of years. Interviewing people is my favorite thing. It is. It just lets me tap into my journalist background and exercise those muscles. I like learning from people who are really, really smart and bringing that to you and trying to pull things out of guests that maybe they're not used to talking about. And yesterday was a great example, that Emery Hunt from CBS Sports and the Football Game Plan Draft Guide, who I've gotten to know over the last couple of years. I have him on the show every year before the draft. I think he's one of the best out there. And one of the reasons is he goes farther and wider with small school prospects, even Canadian colleges, looking, turning over every stone, grading every prospect he can. The other thing he's great with is his objectivity and his focus is so wide. And one of the first things I asked him yesterday was like, how do you prevent just falling in with the consensus? How hard is it to kind of forge your own path, knowing that you're going against what everybody else is saying? You see it in his rankings every year. There are names in there that nobody else is ranking as high as he does. And one of the best examples of that is he has Brady Cook as the number 4 quarterback in his rankings. And I asked him specifically about that, and he gives a great answer about it. Sometimes my favorite interviews I've ever done are the ones that get the least views, maybe because we go the most in depth. Maybe it just, the subject matter just doesn't have as much mass appeal. But based on the numbers, I know a lot of you watching this episode haven't checked out that episode. Go back and watch it. Emery is great. And we don't just talk about the same stuff everyone else talks about. And one of the things he talks about is Brady Cook and how much he likes him. When I first read this, I thought you were talking about Tyler Van, is it Van Winkle? Shoot, now I'm Van Dyke. Tyler Van Dyke from Wisconsin, started out at Miami. I was really high on him 2 years ago. Then he went to Wisconsin, but he's just battled some injuries and some of the shine has worn off of him. Randy Roberts says, love Howard. I'm glad you brought that up. I just today started watching the Gruden stuff, and he's got 2 episodes out so far. And the first one was Will Howard and then Riley Leonard. I'm about 2/3 of the way through the Will Howard one. I just started watching the throwing session. I missed John Gruden, you know? I'm not here to judge what he got in trouble for or anything else. Like, he's in the entertainment business now, and that's all I care about. He's so good at that. And the marriage with him and Barstool is perfect because what's great is, as good as the QB school used to be when he was on ESPN, watching John Gruden with these prospects where it's unfiltered and uncensored and they can say whatever they want is a lot more real, because that's how football players and coaches talk. If it offends you, don't watch it. That's great. But as someone who's been around a lot of football players my entire life and a lot of football practices and coaches and scouts, that's how they talk. And it's a lot more natural. And man, I already liked Will Howard. How can you not like him more after watching that episode? I expect to feel the same way about Riley Leonard as well. I could absolutely see Howard being in play for the Seahawks. The fact they haven't met with him yet, I don't think means anything. Sometimes they specifically try not to meet publicly or let it get out that they're meeting with some of these prospects. They don't want to tip their hand. But Howard's leadership ability, how good he is as a teammate and in the locker room, and how freaking smart he is. Like the whiteboard stuff he does with Gruden, there's no hesitation. Like, he knows his stuff. And I think he's a really good example of how teams have placed such a priority now and a premium on quarterbacks that have played a lot of football. You know, I think that's one of the shifts that we can credit in part to the success of Brock Purdy. He slips all the way through to the last pick in the draft because he's not the biggest, strongest, fastest athlete, played at a smaller school. They played in a kind of a conservative offense. He didn't really throw the ball around a lot. It was a lot of RPO stuff. And then when teams go back to evaluate, like, how did we miss on this guy? One of the reasons was, he played 50 games in college. He came out as a more polished product. Will Howard's one of those guys. Like, you can tell in how he extrapolates the information, or disseminates was the word I was looking for there. Sorry about that. From John Gruden, and spits it back out to him. Just a very, very smart guy, and a guy that you'd love to have on your team. That was a lot of fun. Let's see. Yeah. Ian Victor says, I think this will be the most trade down draft in draft history. I think on this point of the Seahawks, it could very well be. And maybe once this draft gets going, it could be happening all around the league. And here's why. Nobody's traded any picks yet. There's been some player picks, trades with later picks, but every single team right now, as we sit here today, 2 weeks from the draft, still holds their original native pick in the first round. That has never happened. And I don't think any of them are going to be traded between now and draft day either. I think we're going to get to 2 weeks from tonight, and every team is still going to have their native pick. That's never happened before. But I think once the gloves come off, the more even the draft class is, it's about teams have different likes, different needs, different ideas about what's a scheme fit, different priorities. And so where one player might be graded as in the top 20 on one team's board, he might be a top 50 player on another team's board. And so that team that has him in the top 20, may try to come up and get him. So I do think it's going to make for a very entertaining draft. I really do. See, Motive now has a little bit of a draft crush on Will Howard. How can you not? That happens this time of year, right? We've watched these guys. We've heard about them ad nauseum. I've actually started to intentionally not do mock drafts every single day for myself, just because I want it to be a little more fresh. And I don't just want to you do get draft fatigue. And especially if you overdose on mock drafts, you keep taking the same guy at 18, you get tired of doing that. So you start forcing something else. And then the draft comes around, you're like, oh, the guy that I originally had was the guy all along. It's like the old adage that you should never change your answer, your initial instinctive answer on a multiple choice test. It's usually right. And so, yeah, you watch stuff like that. or you watch like breakdowns, like JT O'Sullivan stuff or whatever, or you see somebody just put a cut up on Twitter, 3 minutes of really good plays from a certain prospect, and all of a sudden you love that guy when maybe you didn't know anything about him or maybe you didn't like him earlier in the process, which does show some open-mindedness, right? That's a great quality to have. At the same time, I think it's really valuable to also be open-minded enough to change your opinion on a player in a negative way. Like someone that you maybe were really high on at the beginning of the process, and then as you get farther through it, maybe you're not as high on him. I think Shamar Stewart falls into that category for me, that, just based on the traits and the athletic ability and how hard he plays and what I saw in Mobile for 2 days, I was really high on him as a potential pick at 18. But reading more analysis from people who do this for a living and are really, really smart about evaluating talent, watching some tape, like there's just something that makes me hesitate that maybe he's more Tyree Wilson than he is Jadeveon Clowney, and that he'll end up being a player that's more traits than production, even as he moves forward in the league. That's just one example. I'm not saying I'm out on Shamar Stewart, but just that I've been open to the idea that maybe my initial evaluation of him isn't how I feel about him today. And I think that's really, really important. Whether you're a professional analyst or do it as a hobby or you're just a casual fan, it's something I try to discuss with people anytime they come at me with like, that guy sucks. That guy's terrible. Avoid him at all costs. Well, that's probably a decision that fan made 6 months ago. Great example of that. This quarterback class sucks. Why? Because you heard that at the beginning of the college football season, or because you saw a couple of highlight plays here and there from a couple of prospects in the class and you didn't like it. You have to be open-minded and also understand there's 32 general managers in the league. So there's hundreds of scouts and front office personnel and player personnel directors. They all have different ideas and opinions and needs and wants and schemes and templates. And one team's treasure could be another team's trash and vice versa. That, try not to get mad, I guess is what I'm saying. Don't get so mad if somebody suggests taking a player you don't like, because maybe you're wrong, or maybe they won't take that player after all. Take a deep breath. Try not to get so mad. Let's see. Ideal scenario. This is from Zach. Is the Chicago Bears are super aggressive and trade 39 and 41 for 18. That's not going to happen. And here's why. Let's look at the trade chart. Let's go to the old trusty trade chart. Hold on. I'm not going to share it on the screen. I'll just look it up real quick. Okay. So let's go Chicago. So if they want to move up from 39 to Seattle's pick at 18, that's a difference of 134 points. And so let's see. Well, you know what? This might not be as far off as I thought it was going to be. Let's see. So 153 is the point value of pick 39. 146 is the point value of pick 41. The point value for pick 18 is 287. And so that's a 12-point difference, which, Seattle could kick, if you want to really make it even, they could kick them 172, which is one of their late fifth-round picks. They have two of them. That would get it within 3 points. The only thing is this. The question would be this. Who would that player be that they're moving up for all the way to 10? Offensive tackle, maybe. They don't like the rest of this class. As much as we've seen them be really aggressive in addressing that offensive line with what they did, completely rebuilding the interior offensive line, right? Trading for Jonah Jackson, signing Drew Dalman, trading and extending Joe Thuney. Maybe it's Armand Membu, or maybe it's Will Campbell. And they want to come all the way up and get that guy if they should fall. But the chances of someone being at 18, again, because the mark of this draft and this is pretty much universally a held opinion among the experts, is that it lacks in blue chip talent at the top. That there are 10 or less true first round grades in this class, where in most years it's about twice that. The odds of someone slipping to 18 that the Bears would value enough to give up that kind of value to move all the way up for, very, very slim. Very, very slim, especially considering that the next mark of this draft is that after that blue chip talent is exhausted, that from about 10 or 20 all the way through to 80 or even 100, it's a very level, the talent is very, very level. And so why would you trade 2 high value picks in a very evenly dispersed draft across many position groups to get one player? That doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Would love it if it happened. My goodness. I think that'd be really hard to turn down. I do indeed. Let's see. What do we have here? Sometimes I'll see somebody in the comments responding to what someone else said, but I can't find the original. Here's a good example of that. Colombo Lajo says if he was good, he wouldn't be the 4th choice guard. Who are you talking about? Also, that doesn't make a lot of sense to me because players aren't finished products. How they're drafted or how they're ranked rarely correlates to how good a players are going to be. It's all about each team's evaluation. Does that guy fit what we're looking for? Our scheme, the kind of player he is, the kind of person he is. You know, if you could stack up all 32 teams' draft boards, even just like their top 30, you would see a shocking amount of variance from one board to the next and how differently these teams view these prospects. And that might be truer this year than ever. So to just make a blanket statement like that, I vehemently disagree with. And here's Zach kind of saying the same thing. Y'all do realize round 1, if they go O-line at 18, they'll get the 4th or 6th best offensive lineman. Why does that matter? Why does that matter? You take the best player you can at the time. And if you're convinced he can be a really good player, if Gray Zabel's the pick at 18 and he starts from day 1 and becomes a Pro Bowl left guard and improves your offensive line to the point that that offense can be really good, and now with Mike McDonald's defense, you become a contender, who cares if he's the 4th best prospect coming out in that draft? Who cares? Go back and look at the last 5 first rounds and pick a position group. Defensive tackle is a really good example, or edge. And look at the order they were drafted in, and then pull up today's statistics and look at their production. It'll never line up exactly in the order that they were drafted. It's just not how it works. I think it's a really, really limiting mindset. Try to be open-minded. This is cool. OFG dude says, what about Bradford? He's only 23 years old. He's younger than Haynes. That's a great point. I had kind of written off Anthony Bradford because he's a bigger, mauler type, right? 330 pounds. And even though he's athletic for his size, I just immediately assumed once they hired Clint Kubiak and John Benton and that whole staff that he wasn't going to be a natural fit for outside zone. And I think the reason that people stopped talking about him is because they agreed and they think the same way. But then 2 weeks ago on his radio show, John Schneider like name drops Anthony Bradford as a guy the coaching staff really likes. And a guy that they think that one of the things they love about him is how he gets to the second level for a guy his size and then punishes when he gets there. Like he's a mauler. He pancakes guys. He puts guys in the ground. Don't give up on Anthony Bradford. He could very well be part, and just another example of why you don't go draft 3 interior offensive linemen in those first 5 picks. That would be the dumbest thing they could do. If that's what they end up doing, you're going to see my recap show after the draft, and I'm going to be livid because it would be a gross misuse of draft resources. Because I just saw this stat the other day. What was it? I think the Seahawks are one of only 3 teams that have drafted 7 offensive linemen in the last 3 drafts. They have invested picks, and not top 10 picks, but look at the Pro Bowl, look at All Pro every year, look at the good offensive lines in the league. There's 5 players on those lines, and they're not all first-round draft picks. A lot of them are 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th round picks, and that's where the Seahawks have typically have spent a lot of those picks. Charles Cross, a first rounder, Abe Lucas, third rounder, Christian Haynes, a third rounder, Oluwatimi, a fifth rounder, Bradford, a fourth rounder, Lamea, a sixth rounder, Jarrell, a sixth rounder, and then Sundell, an undrafted free agent, might have a ceiling on Oluwatimi. So, yeah, don't give up on Anthony Bradford. You absolutely could be right. And in fact, I'll add one last little aspect to that note. What we think is going to happen, and this applies to me. Like in my mind, I see Oluwatimi starting week 1 at center, but Jalen Sundell at some point, I feel like might take over that spot and be the long-term guy. I think Christian Haynes is a starting right guard. The tackles are taken care of. Whoever we draft first is probably going to be the starting left guard. That's all based on conjecture and projection, based on the limited amount that we've seen them, and also how they were used by the previous coaching staff on offense, which was all fired. And now you bring in Clint Kubiak, who's lived and breathed his dad's scheme for 30 years, John Benton and Rick Dennison, who've been doing this for 20 years at a very high level, Justin Outen, all those guys. We don't know what they're going to do and how they're going to use these guys. And one of the things that I really hope, and I think this is one of the biggest mistakes Ryan Grubb and Scott Huff made last year, is they didn't establish early enough in the process who the guys were. And also what kind of scheme they were going to run. Like they kept switching back and forth between heavy gap power and heavy inside zone and outside zone. They never settled on an identity, but they also never settled on a 5 until the second half of the season. And then we saw some progress. And some of that was due to injury, right? Bradford goes out and then Connor Williams retires. But once they settled and we saw the same 5 guys get to play together, we started to see finally some continuity and some progress in the running game. But they might have completely different ideas. They might think that Sundell's the guy at center right now. They might think Anthony Bradford is the solution at right guard. And so, we can't really guess, and we can't judge on what we think they might do because it's a whole new coaching staff and a new scheme. Another starred comment, Kevin Mullen. Thanks for the super chat. Whose defensive joker is Mike McDonald targeting, and in what round? You're talking about kind of that box safety, big nickel player. Is that who you're talking about? Because the joker term is used differently from different teams. Sean Payton uses it to describe a kind of an H-back tight end, passing game weapon. But on defense, it's usually that guy, like a Brian Branch in Detroit, right? Is that who you're talking about? That's a great question, and I think we'll certainly know more after this draft. I think that's where Nick Emenwari would fit in if he's taken in the first round, because he's a better. I misspoke. He's a better coverage safety than he is as a box safety. He's not what you want him to be as a box safety based on his size and strength and athleticism. Yet he's a young player; he could develop into that. I think he'd be a candidate there. If Malachi Starks were taken, I think he could be a candidate there. Some guys later on, I think Kevin Winston from Penn State, who just 6 months after his ACL surgery ran his 40 last week. He was a guy I talked about as a potential first-round pick 2 years ago, and then he tore his ACL last year. Better box safety than coverage safety. So I think he could really be that kind of guy too. And then you start to look at some of the linebackers, some of the weak side linebackers. Smile Mondon, from Georgia, I think is a guy who would fit that bill. Shamar Turner from Florida, I think is another one. And then a Sebastian Castro from Iowa. Those are some guys that I think could fit that role. If I'm understanding, what you're talking about, if that's kind of the role that you mean. Here's my favorite comment so far. Brian Myers says, Dan, welcome to the show. How you doing, Brian? John McGrath says, I feel like they will pick 2 O-line players for sure, maybe even 3 in this draft. Yeah, I don't know if you posted this before I mentioned that, but yeah, that's typically when I do mocks. I'm prioritizing 2 things. One is that starting guard in the first 5 picks. 2 is a guy that ideally could play guard too if he needed to, but could be the long-term answer at right tackle if they should move on from Lucas after 2025. and then taking a shot somewhere on day 3 on another guy. And my favorite thing to do is to take an interior offensive lineman I think can play guard or center. Now, that's where Jackson Slater fits in. Let's look at this list again. If you're joining us late, these are the reported 30 visits so far. Jackson Slater, the local kid from Newport High School, he played mostly guard at Sacramento State, but some scouts think he'd be better as a center. We saw him play at Mobile. Bryce Cabeldew is a guy that played tackle at Kansas, but can play guard, so I like that versatility. And some have even suggested he could play center. Maybe they look at a guy like Dylan Fairchild, and I could see this with his wrestling background and the way he's built and his athletic ability. Maybe they see him as a guard conversion. And then there's some other guys on day 3 that I really like too. Clay Webb from Jacksonville State's another one. Former 5-star recruit, number 1 center in the country coming out of high school, top 25 recruit, went to Georgia, couldn't crack the lineup there his first couple of years because they're always stacked. Look what's coming out in the draft this year. That's who he was up against. So he transfers to Jacksonville State, and he's an FCS All-American. Outstanding in pass protection, good enough in the run game too, good zone fit, and a guy that scouts think can play guard or center. I love that kind of versatility. Jonah Monheim from USC is another one that fits that bill, where he's actually a former left tackle playing for USC at that position, then moved inside to center because they had a need last year and really took to it. And another guy that really looked good in Mobile. So I like seeking that kind of versatility. It just gives you different options. You know who's really good at that? The Philadelphia Eagles. They take guys that have that kind of versatility, and then they let them kind of determine where they're going to play. And, look where the Eagles are. They have a Lombardi trophy in large part because of how good their offensive line is. Tasha says, I think they spoke to Ferguson at the Combine. I'd prefer Ferguson to Taylor. Ferguson is not nearly the blocker at this point in his career as Taylor. Very good athlete, very good in the passing game. Taylor, a better two-way talent at this point. Brian says Pro Bowl means Jack popularity contest. My point is simply it's a way to measure how good people think a player is, right? And so yeah, it could be meaningless as far as especially once guys start to pull out and then other people get chosen as replacements, and so they get to put Pro Bowl on their resume. But a player in position to be named to a Pro Bowl is a really good player. So it's a meaning of measure. Yeah, I get your point, Columbo, but go look at the best offensive lines in football, right? Look at some of the really good offensive lines. You're not going to see 5 first-round picks. You're going to see some undrafted free agents and guys. The best example I keep using over and over again, do you remember, I'm sure you do, how the Green Bay Packers came in here and absolutely manhandled us on those first 2 drives? Game was over. Game was absolutely over. They just ran it down our throats the first 2 drives and put the game away. And they did it without any first-round picks, with an undrafted free agent, with a bunch of 4th-round picks. It's not necessary to draft guys high year after year to build a good offensive line. That's my point there. Charlie the Unicorn says Chase Lunt's one to watch. Some of the most fun tape of any offensive lineman I've watched this year. Really, really fun. Like, he gets after it. I used the same comment in reference to a Canadian player that's really fun that Emery turned me on to, and we talked about him on the show yesterday, where Chase Lunt kind of plays as if he thinks the rules dictate that you're supposed to get your guy on the ground every play. That's how he plays. Really, really fun to watch. Wes says, is there any fullback in the draft linked to the Seahawks? Not specifically, because nobody plays fullback in college. Like, Emery didn't even include a fullback category this year. He normally does, because he said he just didn't find any. There's one fullback in college football that's a true fullback, that's a stud, that would be hands down an absolute draft target for the Seahawks, and that's Max Bredesen of Michigan, but he chose to go back for his 5th and final year this year. He's not coming out, unfortunately. So what you're looking for fullback is converting guys. You're looking at H-back types, right? And that's a great segue, because I told you that I would share with you the mock draft I did on the ESPN analytics today. Again, put the graphic up. In fact, oh wait, no, it'd be if I showed it. So here's what I came up with. I traded down from 18 to 21. Steelers came up to 18 to make sure they get the quarterback that they want. And the exchange for that, and this matches perfectly on the trade chart, is we got their third rounder. So I took Donovan Ezeraku, edge at 21, the second most productive edge in FBS last year, 16 and a half sacks, second to Mike Green. A little short, he's 6'3". You usually want your edges to be a little taller than that, but he makes up for it with like go-go gadget arms, 35-inch arms, great pass rush repertoire, high motor, A-plus character. He would be a guy that would give them something a little different than they have at the edge class right now, and they need to add a young edge in this class. Then I come back at pick 50. I go Jaden Higgins. Oh my goodness. That would be tremendous value. I don't think he'll be there at 50, but this draft is unpredictable enough that I went ahead and took him. Like 6'4", outside guy. I've made this case before. I'm not as old on Teteroa McMillan, especially at 18, as many are, if he's there. Jaden Higgins is the same height. He's 5 pounds lighter. He's more athletic. He has a longer wingspan, longer arms, better catch radius. I think getting Higgins at 50 would be far preferable to getting Tet McMillan at 18. Then at 52, Siobhan Revell, who I think has all-pro cornerback starting upside. And the thing that would set him apart from Reek Woolen once he's healthy is he loves to come up and just smoke guys in the run game. Like some of his tape, they played Michigan before he got hurt, and there's some goal line reps where he's just coming up and stoning guys. But then he's also playing press man on the outside. He's playing zone. He's instinctive. He'd be tremendous value there as well. Then in round 3, I get Ratledge at 82, Ty Robinson at 92. He's on the visit list. And then in the 4th round, Wes, I took Harold Fannin, who's not my favorite tight end. He just has such a weird running style. I saw it in Mobile. He had trouble separating against certain DBs in Mobile because he's just so straight up and down. He has these choppy short steps. His hips are really tight. I think that might prevent him from being able to get some separation in man, but he's not built like your traditional tight end. He's 6'3", 235, 240, and they gave him some fullback reps in Mobile, and he's a really good blocker. So you're looking at converting somebody. Here's another name. Did I save it today? That's come into my view in the last couple of weeks. The kid from Old Dominion, Pat Conroy is his name. And he was a tight end too, but really kind of sawed off, 6'2", 240, but a 9.75 relative athletic score, 23 on the bench press, a 4.6 40-yard dash. His 10-yard split is 1.56. A 37-inch vertical, a 10-foot broad jump, a 4.2 shuttle, a 6.83 cone. Those are all like elite level testing scores. He's a guy that played tight end, but kind of projects as a fullback. And so you're looking at guys who have fullback traits. Just to finish that mock draft I did, Chase Lunt in the 4th round. That's kind of where he's projected to go. Love that pick. 5th round, Shamar James out of Florida, one of the fastest GPS times in Mobile, really good cover guy that can run sideline to sideline. 5th round, Damian Martinez out of Miami, who I think is being grossly undervalued in this draft, but a guy that I think is a great fit for outside zone. And he's kind of been up and down in weight. He's played at times over 230 pounds. Maybe you can make a fullback out of him. And then in the 7th round, just taking a couple shots on guys that can help on special teams and also give you some upside. Arian Smith out of Georgia, an outside receiver who's got tremendous speed, can really take the top off. And Craig Woodson, really solid, dependable safety out of Cal, a lot of experience, who can also help you on special teams. So that's that mock draft. I just thought that was kind of fun. Let's see. I had one here. Kevin says, nailed the Joker answer. Yeah, asking off-ball linebacker, box safety prospects. Number of picks to trench, I'd want 6 total. If you consider edge trench, then there are times, and I do, right? They play on the line of scrimmage. There are times that I do take 6 players in this draft. As I mentioned kind of the layout of how I would take my 3 offensive linemen and what roles I'm looking for there. And then I'm looking fairly early in the draft. Didn't get it in the one I just gave to you, right? Kind of lacking there outside of Ty Robinson, but I like how he can play just about anything. A guy like that, right? That can play, anything from one technique, three technique, five technique can move up and down the line like McDonald likes. And then maybe later in the draft, getting a true nose tackle, a Nazir Stackhouse, a Wyatt Black, a Cam Jackson. And then if you add an edge guy to that, that makes 6, right? I think that's a pretty good, this is going to be an identity draft. This is the draft that's going to deliver a pile of young players that fit what Mike Macdonald wants to do, the style he wants to play with, the personality he wants to play with, and the physicality he wants to play with. That's going to be the emphasis. Okay, Desmond Mason. That's it was spelled differently earlier. Okay, I'm going to. Where is he from? What school? I'll check in the database I subscribe to for all 22 tape and see if I can find some stuff on him. Nose tackles, you can always, pure nose tackles you can get later. Guys that don't really have pass rush upside. And there's a bunch of them in this draft. Like the last 3 or 4 drafts have really lacked in like guys over 320 pounds, whether they have the game to play nose or not. This draft has a bunch of them. And so all those names I just mentioned, like those are guys you can get later on to play nose tackle. And yeah, lots of guys that fit in that role are guys that maybe you haven't even heard of, but they just eat up blocks. Alfred Collins is another guy from Texas that I really like. He's a day 2 guy. And he does have a little bit of pass rush upside. But he's a pure nose, and that'd be pretty cool. Oh yeah. Oh, that's who he is, right? Is he the guy that weighs like 460? Desmond Mason? Yeah, haven't watched tape on him yet, but my goodness, you just see pictures and it's like, he doesn't look 460 pounds. It's crazy, right? That'd be awesome. Probably goes undrafted, but hell yes, I'd like to sign that guy. 465, yeah. Did he go to he wasn't at the combine, was he? I don't think so, but let's see what Lance Zierlein says about him. Nope. I must be spelling the name wrong because it's not coming up. I'll look into him and watch some tape. That'll be fun. We'll do a nose tackle episode. That's in the offing before we get to the draft and kind of focus on some of those guys. That's okay. I got you. I got you. Jamari Caldwell. Yeah, Caldwell's different though. Like, even though he's built like a nose tackle, he's got some shake to him. He's got some juice, and saw that in Mobile. And I think he's a guy that can be a lot more than just a nose tackle. He's pretty fun. Probably a 3rd rounder, right? Yeah, this is pretty funny. Imagine Charlie the Unicorn says Watson could lose pounds. I think I got the name right now. Let me see. Here we go. So did he go to the combine? Well, on NFL.com and their official profile from Lance Zierlein, yeah, 6'5", 464. Not going to help much as a pass rusher, might require snap limitations as a run defender. Okay. He'd be giving you what you were hoping to get from Jonathan Hankins. He'd be an early down base package run defender, right? Allows blockers too far into his frame. That can be coached. Unable to make plays unless the action heads right at him. Yeah, he's not going to go sideline to sideline. He's not going to chase a running back down in the flat. But here are his strengths. Massive player with tremendous arm length and large hands. Covers up double teams and prevents them from moving him. Can dissuade A-gap runs when he's playing over the center. Sheds blocks with relative ease when his hands are right. He should have played goalie in hockey. Just someday someone's going to think of that. They're just going to put a big giant dude in net and be like, okay, try to get around me. Only 32 on the bench. How many times? Like, I'm sorry, man. That's a lot. 225 pounds is a lot of weight. Even in my days when I really, really slung a lot of iron around, that was probably about my max, actually, 225. But then again, I'm not 6'5" and 464. I don't know if you can tell, but I do like pineapple on my pizza. Here's my favorite combination with pineapple. I like I'll take a Hawaiian pizza and then dress it up a little bit, not just ham and pineapple. That's kind of boring. Ham, pineapple, bacon, jalapeno. I love contrast in flavors. So you get the spicy, you get the savory, the sweet. That's what the pineapple lends. And then I'll drizzle sriracha on top of it too. My goodness, now I'm craving pizza. And that on that note, we're going to wrap it up. Oh, you guys, thank you. Again, sign up for memberships if you would. You'll see all the different packages and some of the perks there. And what that'll get you is some early access to non-time sensitive pre-recorded videos. First example of that is as soon as I'm done here, I'm going to watch John Schneider's radio show from today, do a blind react to it. I'll upload it tonight, and then it'll be available to the general public tomorrow at 9 in the morning. And so between now and then, once it's posted, if you're a member, you get to watch it exclusively. We'll also do some members only chats, or at least one right before the draft. And we'll have some fun with that. And speaking of food and everything else, I hinted at this earlier and then I never got back to it, is, we're going to be on the air together for 3-4 hours on day 1 and 2. So I'm going to have to eat. So maybe we'll do some fun stuff. Maybe I'll get some pizza on one of those nights and maybe order something locally here, and we'll kind of do some fun stuff. We'll compare notes about what y'all are eating, since the draft is during dinner time on those first 2 days. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Hit the bell if you want to be notified of future episodes, and all the different ways that you can support the channel are listed down below. On Twitter, Blue Sky at Seahawks Forever. And again, tune in tomorrow for my reaction to the John Schneider show. And then on Saturday morning, my conversation with Justin Milo of the Draft Network. We're going to get some of his thoughts and pick his brain about the class as a whole, obviously. We'll talk a little bit about quarterbacks, but we're going to focus primarily on the running back class. We haven't really dug deep into that. But even though you might think it's not a need, the Seahawks are going to draft a running back out of this outstanding and deep class. There will be tremendous value on day 3 in this class. And so we'll get some of Justin's thoughts on who he thinks would be scheme fits. And in particular, trying to find some guys that can return some kicks too, because I think that's something that's lacking from the roster right now that Seahawks are absolutely going to add, especially with the latest tweaks to the kickoff rule that might result in more kickoffs. So thanks for watching, you guys, and engaging. Always appreciate it. And any support you can give the show. And the best way is just share it and engage, comment down below. So until tomorrow, we'll end it the way we always do. Forever and always, go Hawks.